if indeed Revelation 2 and 3 is happening at the time of John, which is not a very controversial point. I think most people would agree with that so far. The 7 churches are real churches at the time of John in the first century. And if Revelation 21 and 22 is the new world to come, now some of you might be surprised. There are people who have a different view from that, but let's not get into it right now. Let's say that Revelation 21, 22, the new world to come after Judgment Day, perfection, eternal glory. So you got Revelation 3, the time of John, Revelation 21, the world to come. If, as I propose, Revelation 4 through 20 is the link, Revelation 4 through 20 is linking John's time to the end of the world and describing what happens in between, then Revelation provides a very useful role in the canon for giving us an inspired heaven-eye view of world history and church history through the interadvental age between the two comings of Christ. If that's not the case, then we have a gap in the canon. And again, this is not a foolproof argument. It could be that God didn't feel it necessary to provide a canonical history of what happens in between the two comings of Christ. But if it is what I propose, then that is a very useful thing to have in the canon, because in the Old Testament we have inspired commentary on the history of Israel. If we didn't have some of those books, say that we just had a video recording, we had the Torah, and then we had a video recording of the life of David and Solomon and Rehoboam, and then the kingdom splits, and we had video recordings of the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom eventually going off in exile to Assyria and Babylon. We would be left to our own devices to figure out a lot of questions like, what went wrong here? Why did the kingdom split? Why did they go off into exile? But if we have when we have a canonical record, then we have a better picture. It doesn't answer all of our questions, but it certainly gives a lot of feedback into how God viewed what was going down in Israel's history. Just one example, we're picking a lot on Solomon in chapter 11, after part of this downhill slide after Solomon's 666 talents of gold and his idolatry. His heart turned away from the Lord. And so the Lord said to Solomon, "Since this has been your practice, and you have not kept my covenant and my statutes that I commanded you, I will surely tear the kingdom from you and will give it to your servant. Yet for the sake of David your father, I will not do it in your days, but I will tear it out of the hand of your son. However, I will not tear away all the kingdom, but I will give one tribe for your son, for the sake of David my servant, and for the sake of Jerusalem that I have chosen." Now, when we read the rest of the book of Kings and the Chronicles of the Kings of Judah, we know when we see that when Solomon's son Rehoboam makes this foolish decision and listens to his young advisors rather than the wiser elders, and says, "My father scourged you with whips, also I'm going to scourge you with scorpions," and the northern tribe said, "We've had enough of you," and they split off. We realize that this was not just a once-off. The kingdom didn't split because of one foolish thing that Rehoboam said or did. If we were just watching the video and we saw that that was the breaking point, we might think, oh, Rehoboam is the cause. He said this foolish thing that caused the kingdom to split. Well, certainly that was the instigating factor in the moment. But having this inspired commentary and this conversation that the Lord had with Solomon, we know that the Lord had already decided to take the kingdom, to split the kingdom, to divide it, because Solomon's gross idolatry and his rebellion against all the laws of the Torah. And so Solomon had already precipitated what happened to his son. And the only reason it didn't happen in Solomon's lifetime was that God was being gracious to his promise to David to fulfill the covenant, and then he would have a son sitting on the throne And as we continue reading through the history of Israel, and we see the rocky future that um, that both the northern and the southern kingdom have, and yet the southern kingdom holds off longer and does better. Again, we see that God was being faithful to his covenant to David, that it wasn't the stellar performance of the southern kings so much as God saying, I'm going to fulfill my promise to David, my servant, and my love for Jerusalem, my chosen city, and representative of the bride that is to come. So we have this inspired commentary that helps us to understand the history of Israel. And I'm suggesting that Revelation provides us a heaven's eye picture, provides us a lens. There's still going to be plenty of questions, just like we can have unanswered questions about Israel, his history. But at least Revelation 4 through 20 provides us some significant headway into what we really need to know to heaven's picture of church history. The history of the world and the church in between the first century and the return of Christ at the very end. We have an understanding of God's commentary and God's view on this whole intervening picture that we wouldn't have if there's this quantum jump in Revelation from the first century just to the very end without filling the gap in between. So I think it's not a foolproof argument, but there is a level of satisfaction. Like I always kind of wished that the canon had told us more of the story of how God views the developments of church history. God, what did after the first century? There's some big developments in church history in the 4th century and going on. Some big developments in the 16th century and going forward. What is God's perspective on all this? And I always kind of felt like it'd be nice to have another book in the canon that tells God's view of church history. And actually now I think that we do. I think that the book of Revelation, that's what it reveals to us if we will learn its language to be able to hear what the Spirit is saying to the churches.